What happened to your local newspaper? Why is the only news you get about your hometown involving crime or something tragic? Hello, everyone. I'm Tracy Grant, Chief Correspondent for OVIS. Today's topic, news deserts. Why the demise of local news is destroying our democracy.
You're listening to the OVIS podcast with Tracy Grant.
Welcome to the OVIS podcast. Our topic today, news deserts. How the demise of local news is leading to a crisis in our democracy and what you can do about it. Our special guest today is Justin Kerr. He's the publisher and editor-in-chief of the McKinley Park News, an online hyper-local news site for the people of the McKinley Park neighborhood in Chicago. Welcome, Justin.
Thanks so much for having me on, Tracy.
We're happy to have you. Also joining me is OVIS founder Linton Johnson. Linton has been a journalist and a communications executive for the past 33 years. He started OVIS to create a new business model that not only incentivizes the truth, but also has the potential to fund hyper-local newsrooms across the world. Welcome, Linton.
Wow, thank you. Always glad to be on your program, Tracy.
Let's first start with a new study from Northwestern University's Medill School of Journalism and Integrated Marketing. The study is called The State of Local News in 2022. It says that news deserts are growing, meaning lots of local news outlets are closing. The study says 70 million residents, or 1/5 of the country's population, have either no local news or live in an area where there's only one local news source left. And the study says it's at risk of closing. The study also says this lack of local news is a crisis for our democracy because the very limited access to critical news and information prevents people from making informed decisions. Now, my first questions are for you, Justin. You run a successful hyper-local news outlet. Now, just for people who are watching right now who might not know what a hyper-local news outlet is, could you explain?
Sure. We use the term hyperlocal, but sometimes I even call it micro-local because of our very, very small focus. We just focus on one single neighborhood in the Chicago metropolitan area, a neighborhood called McKinley Park. It's at the geographic center of the city, but it's really kind of this small neighborhood, kind of a sleeper neighborhood surrounded by a bunch of elements that separate it kind of from our neighbors. And it's about 15,000 residents, hundreds of businesses, definitely part of Chicago, but, really not one of the premier neighborhoods in Chicago. But that's what we focus on, both the neighborhood and the industrial area right next to it.
And you said to me earlier that this paper is basically about getting the info out there.
Yeah, absolutely. We serve a utility purpose to a great degree, just getting a lot of the basic community information online and available for people to see. One of our primary features is a comprehensive community calendar where I take and try to list absolutely every event and happening and everything that I can find in our neighborhood in the calendar. This is done for free. And we have, I think to date, we've published over 20,000 events, different event listings. We have hundreds and hundreds of events listed every month. And these range from, smaller things like church services all the way to like big shows and concerts that might be going on in the community.
Do you have can we take a look at the sneak peek?
Yes, I'm going to share my screen. This is one of our calendar pages. Can you see it all right?
We can, yeah, looks good.
So this is our full calendar. This just shows all of the calendar events that we have listed for, this is just January for this month. And you can see everything that's already listed in here. And you can mouse over any one of these and jump in to get complete details about that event, including where it's happening, when it's happening, how to sign up for it. There's an interactive map that people can use to find where it's located. And we slice and dice our events in a number of different ways. There's also, for example, we have different calendars for ice skating, for veterans. Let me see if I can jump around and get some more of these pulled up.
You said
doing
McKinley. Oh,
Go ahead, Tracy.
Yeah.
you said you said McKinley Park was a sleeper neighborhood, but there's a lot going on. Looking at that calendar.
Oh, well,
Just
yeah.
January
See,
alone.
that's the thing. Every neighborhood, might be a considered a sleeper neighborhood, but they're really not. There's stuff going around all of us all the time, everywhere. And, a lot of this stuff was happening, this is all happening independent of the McKinley Park News. But if nobody knows about it, who will attend? And so we really try to, focus a lot on the events. And we work with a number of different community partners to make sure that their events are also included. I'm going to jump over to a page. Let me jump over to the institutions page. This lists all of the neighborhood institutions that have a special higher profile access on the account, or a special higher profile account on the website. They can jump in and they can submit their own events to the calendars, as well as manage their own events. And so we've got, dozens actually of community organizations that we interface with directly, and then, they participate in our publication by sharing their events and, all of the things that they do. So let's jump over to Thomas. So you can see here.
These higher profile people are basically sponsors, and then they have a little extra access. Is that what you're saying?
So I'm going to jump out. Those folks are not-for-profit organizations, elected officials, community groups that get a free account, no cost. Free account, full support from us. And also, we interface with them directly to help them get their news out to the community too. A lot of times we're the sole resource for where they can put out a press release and where they can get information out to the community for what's going on. We also have a paid sponsorship program where sponsors have their own tier of access to the website. They also have access and license to do things on the website, such as share their commercial events to the neighborhood. The only commercial content that is allowed on the website is that which occurs through our sponsorship program, whether sponsors participating in our community or taking out an advertising campaign, for example.
It looks a lot like what my old hometown newspaper used to look like. I mean, the Miami Herald was a million pages, it seemed. And every time I go home, I think, well, why is this only like 4 pages? But it's legacy publications are closing and they're trimming down, right? Why?
Well, absolutely. So an interesting example in our coverage area is the Bridgeport News. This is a legacy print publication that I believe published for 80 or 90 years in Chicago's Bridgeport neighborhood, which is the neighborhood right next to McKinley Park. And they also, crossed over into our neighborhood and would cover things occasionally. But they really got to the point where they were just subsisting on revenues from legal classified ads, I think. They really didn't have a newsroom to speak of anymore. They had mostly just run press releases and maybe have some display advertising associated with it. But really it was kind of diminishing in terms of both the service that they were providing to the community and, what they were able to provide as a news product. And they also did not, try to get online or pursue new media revenue opportunities. So I think they kind of, that's indicative of, what happens, I think, to a lot of legacy publications. They kind of hang on, usually just subsisting on legal classifieds until they finally just give up the ghost.
Wow. And stop producing original news products.
Yeah. I mean, they had stopped producing a lot of original news and reporting anyway. I think that was kind of the diminishment of their newsroom, so a lot of it was just kind of unqualified columns from the alderman alongside press releases, packaged with some ads, and not really originating investigative reporting, original reporting. Occasionally they'd have good utility information, like maybe event listings or things like that, but very diminished from like the glory days of what it used to be like, as you know.
Right. And during those glory days, journalism was supposed to be objective. Can you explain why small papers are ending up with stories that have virtually no pushback from the other side.
So it's the aspect of lack of competition. It's the aspect of a news desert. I think there might be internal factors as well, where a stressed newsroom might not have the internal resources to fact check or to qualify the veracity of sources or things that they're publishing. There's a lot of pressure for newsrooms just to get things out there quickly, and maybe they're not checking it as much as they might have been.
Exactly. That can be dangerous,
Yeah.
It's funny you asked that question, Tracy, which is a really good question, because I see that especially in my hometown area where we have a person who is basically just a gossip columnist, but he purports to be the local journalist. He says that he is the East Bay citizen here in East Bay of Northern California, the San Francisco Bay Area. And, the stupid crap comes across this paper, such as there was a district attorney who won. Her name is Pamela Price, and she won the district attorney's race. And the guy said, "Oh, this is the first time she's ever won an election." And she's won 2 prior elections, but when you're the only competition and no one challenges you and you don't have the resources to fact check, you inadvertently, and sometimes in his case, I think purposely spread misinformation and fake news. And, these news deserts, or having one outlet, according to this study that Northwestern did, it shows that, the lack of quality information does make it difficult for people to make informed decisions in their lives. So Justin, I praise you for having this hyper local news, because I know this is a passion project. You're not making a lot of money off of this, but why do you find it so important to do?
Well, as we mentioned when we were chatting earlier, there's an element of vested self-interest in this too. Even though this does ultimately have to succeed as a business in order to be viable and for me to continue it, I was motivated for starting this thing because I was in the neighborhood. I stumbled across a neighborhood festival that I didn't know about and I didn't have time to go to, but I would have if I could have planned for it. I'm like, why wasn't this listed? Why wasn't there a listing for it? Why didn't I know about this? And that was the thing. That was like 2008. And I was like, our neighborhood needs something like this because it doesn't have it. I wanted the information. And part of building the McKinley Park News for me was building what I wanted to see also as a homeowner and resident of the neighborhood, embedded in the community, living there permanently, living alongside my neighbors and with the people who I wanted to meet and who I wanted to help, and the local community groups that I wanted to help promote, get their word out about what's going on, because there's nothing to support it in that direction right now. And so that was a real big motivating factor for me. And then I think other people really appreciate that too. And, I've gotten a lot of feedback, and that the things that we're doing are useful, both the utility information like the event listings and the data that we put out there, but also a lot of the stories that we originate, which might be breaking news. We broke the story on a major industrial development called Matt Asphalt, right in our neighborhood. And we've covered it more than anybody else. Or even showing the personalities of the neighborhood, like the local businesses that otherwise wouldn't be profiled, or the local librarian. We have this wonderful children's librarian. We did a great profile on her the other day. So these are people see regularly, and now when they see them again, they go like, "Oh, hey, I saw you, and that's so cool about your background," or things like that. It engenders a sense of community, and as a resident, that's the type of neighborhood that I want to live in. So I built the McKinley Park News to be, the type of publication that I'd want to read, that I'd want to live with, and that I'd want to support my neighborhood. And then hopefully I can make it a business too, and maybe even, grow it to other neighborhoods someday.
Well, like the story that you said you broke, I mean, if so many markets have been abandoned, so that story probably would have never gotten done, right?
It would have gotten, that story in particular is pretty controversial, so it would have gotten picked up and done, but so many people follow our coverage. I broke another story about the largest aviation maintenance school in all of North America, landing right in our neighborhood, a huge facility. Nobody else picked it up. Nobody else noticed it until I got it. There's a really, really good publication in Chicago called Crane Chicago Business. And those guys are tight, good stuff, and I love scooping those guys. And I can't scoop them because they're not in the neighborhood. They don't have the resources to get down here. They don't have a person locally to pay attention to what's going on. It's because of these news deserts, it makes it easier to get the scoops and easier to do those sorts of things and to, lead news coverage about what's going on in the neighborhood. I also think it helps elevate the neighborhood's profile in a number of ways.
Do you find that you not only scoop a lot of folks, that people are picking up your stories from larger, like WGN and other big television stations as well?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So I did there's this crazy set of circumstances where street racers, kind of these, younger people in fast cars, probably a lot of their parents' cars, and probably a lot of kids from the suburbs, come into the neighborhood, rip up and down the streets, pulling donuts. There was a parking lot, a big grocery store parking lot where it'd be like a party, hundreds of people every Friday and Saturday night. And I got a bunch of original footage, original reporting on it. And, at this crazy riot that happened, these guys, there's some minor accident, and then the crowd trashed a car, just, physically tore it apart in the middle of the parking lot. That was our story first. And then all the TV stations came, hey, spectacular footage we can use. And so then they picked that up. So I find that as a small media outlet, we set the tone for a lot of these stories that otherwise get ignored. And it's because these newsrooms, they're too stressed. They're too overworked. They don't have time to get out into the neighborhoods, and they only have the opportunity to follow other people's coverage. We're very small, so, they probably get a lot more traffic than we do at the stories we originate, but that's the way things work out. And it's satisfying too, I love getting the scoop, man. It's like, if you're a journalist, Clint, you know what it means to that story, get it good and get it out there. It's so satisfying. I get a buzz off it.
Well, these things that we're talking about, the stories that you have done and people you have scooped, that's all fantastic. But how do we make enough money to fund journalism like that in every market?
Yeah, that's the $64,000 question. So a lot of the studies that are coming out of Northwestern, and we're also involved in Northwestern's Metro Media Lab incubator program, they're showing that people aren't as willing to pay for news, and that the ability for subscriptions to support a news product may not be enough. I see the real huge opportunities in advertising and advertising of different sorts. And we have sponsorships and advertising with the McKinley Park News that delivers revenue for us. We're always competing against the market duopoly of Facebook and Google, which dominate the online advertising marketplace from both ends. Some would say in a uncompetitive and criminal manner, and that maybe the FTC should get involved. That would certainly help our local news business if Google and Facebook weren't so dominant and manipulative of the online advertising marketplace. I see. So, nobody's got the answer to that question yet, Tracy. I see more opportunities for revenue in advertising, but then some folks are also talking about events or subsidiary services that also go along with, say, delivering an advertising project. So they'll also provide some marketing services. The question, though, is at what point do you stop being a news outlet and you start being one of these other sorts of companies? I firmly believe that news is a valued product that should be monetizable, that should be able to power, a good revenue for a business. I came into the journalism business in 89, 90, kind of the end of the glory days, as it were. I saw the money in newsrooms, the massive amounts of money that went through print newspapers. And all of that is gone. It was squandered by the leaders of our industry who didn't, jump on other advertising opportunities and other revenue opportunities. So we're trying to figure it out. I do have a plan. I know how much money I need to make to, make myself happy and cover our costs. Another difference too is our philosophy is bottom-up development, including revenue development, rather than top-down. So, for example, there might be a citywide publication that decides, hey, we want to go after these news deserts, we want to go after these markets. Let's go hire beat reporters for, this neighborhood and that neighborhood and this neighborhood. Our model, rather, is to build permanent individual publications from the bottom up, staffed by persistent permanent publishers who are permanent residents of the neighborhood, who live there, who aren't going to be a beat reporter who's transient, who gets up and moves along. And we're exploring different business structures to enable that. Maybe something along a franchise model where, tools and resources are provided for different publishers. But the main thing is the publishers themselves should be independent and kind of grow organically from like the smallest populations growing upward, maybe into a news network, rather than from the top down, which I don't think is economically sustainable. So that's our kind of the business directions we're exploring currently, but I don't have any answers yet. And honestly, I don't think anybody really does either.
Right. Well, Linton, a lot of what we talked about is really disappointing and sad, what's become of journalism and areas in different parts of cities where there's just no coverage. What can OVIS do about this?
Well, I mean, we're exploring a different business model. We believe that the ratings and clicks business model is what's leading to these news deserts, because the newsrooms, when I'm looking at the history of newsrooms, they're owned by shareholders and they want bigger and bigger profits. So in order to get bigger and bigger profits, you got to cut the staff, right? And when you're cutting the staff, then they can't produce the local news. And if you can get away with just putting out a few press releases and regurgitating the press releases and making money off of that, then there's actually no journalism being done, but the shareholders are happy. So we're trying to micro fund the news. I believe the subscription model is a difficult one, but what we've done at OVIS is we have a rewards model. We're incentivizing truth telling. So ours is a little bit different. It involves sharing in the profits. Instead of having shareholders take all the money, the people own the product. The people own the news. So the way it works on our platform is a person gets to decide, they get to choose the news. They get to decide what story they believe the OVIS should cover, an OVIS journalist would cover, and then they post that on our platform. And then everyday people get to upvote those stories with tokens. So let's just say 1,000 people like a story idea and each token is worth $1. That story now comes with $1,000 worth of money. And a journalist sees that and goes, oh, clearly people want that story to be covered. So they cover that story. But the story can't just be published. It has to go through fact checkers. And a minimum of 3 fact checkers will look at that story. They're independent and they're certified. And they don't know each other. So they look at the story, they make sure that it's accurate. And if 2/3 of them pass the story, then it goes to the platform. So now the community can see a verified story. And then additionally, that $1,000 purse gets distributed amongst the journalists, the fact checkers, and then the person who came up with that great story idea gets rewarded for coming up with a good story idea. And then the remaining portion of that goes to the rest of the community. So the last bit of that $1,000 purse gets distributed amongst the community members. And what's interesting about that is the more you are active on the platform, the more you're pitching story ideas, the more engaged that you are, the bigger portion of that last piece of that purse. So it encourages people to be active. It encourages people to participate and buy tokens. And what it really does is, what Justin was talking about is this bottoms up approach that he's talking about. We also believe that as well. We want a bottoms up approach where the people decide the news, the people fund the news, and the profits are shared amongst the people and not going to shareholders who are trying to gut the news. So that's really the whole point of what we're trying to do.
I mean, what do you think about that, Justin?
It's very interesting. Linton and I were talking about the use of the blockchain as a ledger to verify and track all of this stuff. And I think that's a really interesting use case for the technology that I've never seen or heard of before. And I also, I think that's interesting too. Might represent a funding opportunity for how we report the news or about how news is brought to us. The devil's in the details, of course. But I like this idea of people-driven news. There's also, to a degree, journalists also have a role to kind of maybe make people aware of stuff they might not otherwise know about. So I think there's a little bit of that too. But I would imagine journalists can also participate in the platform.
Yeah, I mean, a journalist is a person.
Yeah.
A journalist is a person, so they get to decide. I mean, they can pitch story ideas too, and they'll probably pitch them better than anybody else. But sometimes journalists don't make a decision that, news doesn't. I think in a lot of newsrooms, people are sick and tired of crime, unless it's personally affecting them. They're just sick and tired of hearing about negative, and they want to hear other stories. And I think that's what's driving people away from the news. And then, of course, there's also, a lot of news outlets are very slanted. Obviously, you have a particular focus on your neighborhood, so that makes sense. But when you're trying to create a political slant, that I think is driving a lot of people away from the news. Is like, I can't trust it because they have an agenda. And so this is always the people's agenda, what we're trying to do. And then back to the hyper local piece of it. The hyper local piece is that we can create a microsite on OVIS that's just about, say, East Bay news. So I was talking about that Pamela Price incident where the East Bay Citizen, who is a gossip columnist, not a journalist, gets his information wrong. Well, we could create a microsite and give that person some competition and say, to people, if you live in the East Bay of Northern California, pitch story ideas that are important to you, and then the journalists will cover the most upvoted ones, and we can create that hyperlocal news, which is really what we're trying to do, is provide trustworthy, verifiable, and accountable news to local communities to help to create an oasis out of these news deserts.
You said something interesting, Linton. You said a journalist is a person, but also in many cities, a journalist is now a ghost. I mean, just doesn't exist.
Yeah. I mean, it's because, they're just cutting the profits, or they're gutting the newsrooms for profits. And Justin, you remember this, Tracy, you remember this, the good old days of journalism when it was about doing something civically for our community. Everybody understood this was a public good. Then shareholders got involved and said, "Oh, but we can make money off of this too." And then that's when everything started to change.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you both for joining us. We're going to be returning on a regular basis to tell you more about OVIS and to have spirited discussions like this one. You can sign up to be part of the OVIS community on ovisnews.com. Also, we have some links down below for the website, Facebook, LinkedIn, and for Telegram if you want to know more, or if you want to suggest things for us to cover. Thank you both. I appreciate your being here.
Well, it's an honor, Tracy. Thanks so much for having me on.
Have a great one, Tracy.